Just in case you haven't seen this technique from me yet, and I'll often do something that you might have seen already because when I make the videos I'm not sure of the order in which I will publish them. I'm using a technique called grain filling on the headstock. And the purpose of grain filling, well, there are a couple of purposes actually. See, if you're putting on, I've got a bit of oil on that, I'll have to sand it off. I'm annoyed that I did that, but never mind, I can fix it. So if you're putting on a clear coat, building up a clear coat and you want a nice glossy finish, but you've got a wood that has quite an open pore, an open grain. So the grain is perhaps a bit more porous than the rest of the wood. Perhaps the grain sinks below the surface of the wood. The grain is such that the wood isn't going to be nice and flat. Then you'll want to fill that so that you can then sand it flat, and then when you put your finishes on, it doesn't require a whole lot of building up to get a nice glossy finish. And the other reason you might do it is that it can have quite a nice visual effect. If you put, say, a dark coloured grain fill in there, then the grain will become more contrasting in colour, especially under a clear finish. And that's the main reason I'm doing it in this case. And what I'm using is actually just some drywall compound, and I've coloured it with some black dye so that it's dark grey in colour, but under any sort of coat, be it oil or a clear coat, that will look very dark. It'll look black. And I'm doing it because I don't have a very open grain, and I'm not doing it on most of the neck, but just on the headstock here on the back, where the pieces of wood join, there's a very, very, very fine crack. It's only on the surface, and generally where pieces of wood join, even if you're not aware of a crack, there may be a very, very small one. So I'm filling that. I've applied it quite liberally and then taken a rag and just wiped it really flat, getting off all the excess to make the sanding up easier afterwards. And I've decided to do it on the front and the back. And on this side here I have begun sanding up. See what's happening there. Any parts that for any reason aren't completely flat will just retain some of that filler, and you can see that there. See, I didn't even realize those little spots were there. They were so hard to see and they're so shallow, and you might think, oh, that looks dirty. Actually, it looks quite effective when you have put, in this case it's going to be an oil finish. You can keep sanding until it's flatter so that those are gone, and I probably will do a little bit more, but that's what a grain fill looks like. It just fills up everything so that the surface is flat. Well, now that I didn't show you this, but I've drilled the holes for the tuners, and I've given the neck an overall sand, and you can just see some dark marks from the grain fill, but not very much, and that's fine. I'm going to use an oil finish on this, and I've been researching my options, and I've decided to go with this, which is a tung oil blend, and it's basically tung oil, which is a popular guitar finish, especially guitar neck finish, and it's blended with vegetable turpentine, so it's kind of like when you take a clear coat finish and dilute it with mineral spirits. Well, this is diluted with mineral turpentine, vegetable turpentine, and the purpose of that is to help with penetration, and it also shortens the drying time, and it probably makes it easy to make money off the stuff because it's not as concentrated when they sell it. But I'm going with that. So I've got the neck sitting here on a drop sheet. It's flammable, but it's not like an aerosol, so I'm not wearing a respirator. And the instructions tell me to just give this a good coat, leave it for 10 minutes or so, and then give it a wipe down. Unfortunately, I can't use my Monster Guitars ink stamp with this because the oil does interfere with that, causes it to run a bit especially when you're rubbing it on or rubbing off the excess. So that's unfortunate. Maybe I need to come up with another system. Maybe a brand. Maybe a brand would be good. A hot branding iron. In any case, there'll be no logo on this one. And you must, as many users have told me, you must treat this stuff as flammable because it is. So after you've done wiping up, you need to be careful what you do with your rags. Don't leave them all lying around together, bunched up in your workshop, unless you want to potentially burn it down. Clean them or dry them out at least before disposing of them. So this is going to be a bit of a messy finish as I spray it on. The magic happens when you start rubbing. So I'll do this side, rub it, and I will just do the same over my fretboard as well. It's an oil, and that's fine. It's not going to do any harm there. Okay, I'll leave that for about 10 minutes. I went to grab my phone to see what the time is, but you are my phone, videoing this. So I'll be back shortly. That looks quite nice. It has a darkening effect on the wood, as you would expect from an oil. Oops, it's sort of run onto the other side, which is okay. In this case, I would have been more careful if I had not been going to oil the other side, but since I want to oil the whole thing, that's fine. Yeah, and now I've got oil all over myself. What a mess. It's okay. It's okay. Now I will leave that for about 10 minutes, wipe it off, then basically leave it, come back tomorrow, do another coat, then the next day do another coat, and you'll see how I manage that. It's the following day and I'm ready to put on another coat. And I'm aware that plastic drop sheet isn't great for the camera because it reflects a lot. It makes it hard to see. Looks nice though. It looks nice. The grain is certainly popped. The wood just looks nice and darker. It's got kind of an amber tint to it, which is, I don't know, in my view, always a nice thing to have on wood. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead now and apply another coat. I've decided to elevate it slightly on these two pieces of scrap wood just because a little bit of oil does puddle beneath it, and yeah, the less mess you have to deal with, the better on the wood itself. So it makes it easier to wipe down. Now this will not absorb quite as readily or quickly as the initial coat because it's not being applied to bare wood anymore. It's being applied to oiled wood. So there's a bit of resistance in that, which is good. It's one of the reasons you oil wood. It'll be quite resistant to water by the time I've done doing this. So I'll just leave that for about half an hour, same as last time, then come back and wipe off all the excess and then leave it for the rest of the day to dry, and I'll apply another coat tonight. Now instead of just doing the usual wipe off, first what I'm going to do is buff it with some 000 synthetic steel wool. You can also use wet and dry sandpaper, use something very fine like, I don't know, 1200, or you can use regular steel wool too, made with actual steel. And it will do the same thing. The trouble is sometimes with steel wool, you get little particles of steel breaking off and making a mess. And this is just a bit tidier. Now, I've not done this before, but I've seen it done. And you don't have to do it because what you would already have is what you might think of as quite a nice matte finish with the oil on the wood. And this just buffs it up, scuffs it a little into, I don't know, I guess you might call it a satin finish. So a little bit shinier. Obviously, it's an oil finish, so you're never going to get a gloss coat like you would with a lacquer like polyurethane or something else. But it's looking pretty nice. Pretty nice indeed. Okay, and once I've given it a good scuff with this, as I think I have now I'll wipe off the excess, and I'll do the same thing in the final coat. And yeah, that just looks I'll show you in a moment. You may be able to see the difference through the camera. It does have a nice polished look to it now. Oh, you can see there's a spot there I haven't wiped away yet, but I'll get onto that. There we go. The tung oil finish is done. I will leave it to dry for another day before I do anything further to the neck. Yeah, so I didn't apply a third coat in the end. The first 2 coats I left sitting on there very thickly applied for about 10 minutes each. You wouldn't necessarily have to do that. I've seen some videos of people who just apply the oil and then rub it in straight away. So that had a bit more time to penetrate. And just looking at it and feeling it, it just doesn't need more. I like the color of it. I like the look of it. I like the feel of it. So yeah, I'll just need to, when it's dry fully, drill in the holes. I'll do that once I've drilled the holes into the body, and install the tuners, and then this neck is completely finished. Pending any adjustments to the frets that I will have to make once I have set the guitar up. The fretboard is still seeping just a little, so I'll allow that to dry a bit more. We'll give it a few more wipes with a clean rag, and then we're done.